I gotta bring up someone who is already a legend. I don't even know if that's a strong enough word for what we have for you today, for who we have for you today. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an interview with none other than Young Art, nycfurby, Team Spooky's very own.
Yeah, how you doing? How you doing, guys? Really happy to be here. I know Neutral. I think it's my first time on the broadcast. You guys been doing like an amazing job, like, you know, just boosting, keeping Street Fighter V like alive and relevant, and keeping the viewers interested so far. And you know, I'm just happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, and also we know you're hot off the heels of doing big things with Defend the North, running a very successful event. So before we get into all the details about your very storied history with Street Fighter and just Capcom fighting games at large, congratulations. That was honestly a great event to watch. I know the players really enjoyed it. So I know you were stressing a little bit about building up Defend the North and you know, all the goodies you had for the players there. So congrats on running that.
I couldn't be more proud of the tech team that was assembled for Defend the North to make that happen. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and say like it was all me. I'm only as good as my team. So, you know, shout out to the entire staff at Defend the North.
All right, so, you know, I brought up your history when it came to the intro, and that's something that I want to immediately get into. You've been around for so long, man, and you've put in so much work, but what even got you into this fighting game stuff in the first place?
Oh, man, like, it's literally, like, I'm 5 years old. I'm going to a VHS rental video shop. VHS,
yeah.
Right?
Damn.
I'm sitting on the stool playing Street Fighter 1. My dad gives me $1 and says, like, you know, I'll be back in a couple of hours. Have fun. Wow. Right? That's literally how it started for me.
Not even Street Fighter 2. Street Fighter 1.
Yeah.
That's gone.
Street Fighter 1. Wow. Like, the number of people who have even played that game. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
That's a tiny portion of people. I have never seen Street Fighter 1 in the wild ever. I think almost anyone, you know, at least 27 or older, 26 or older, has seen Street Fighter 2 in the wild somewhere. That was everywhere. But Street Fighter 1, could you do a Shoryuken back then?
So I was the annoying kid. Like, I was asking like all the older guys, like, hey, how you do that move? And they were like, I'm not telling you, kid, right? You know, back in the day when internet wasn't really commonplace back then. Like, I mean, I had it because I was lucky because my dad was a university professor, but you couldn't really find out any info on moves for the most part. And bonus points if you played on the original Street Fighter 1 with pressure buttons. I played on the 6-button one. The one with pressure buttons, the one by Atari, that's the original one. I never played on that as a kid.
What you mean by pressure button?
Right. So, you didn't know about that, Rob?
Didn't know about that, yeah.
Man.
So there's a Street Fighter 1. There's two versions of Street Fighter 1. One, I think, was published by Atari, and instead of the jab strong fierce, you press the button harder for jab strong fierce. So it's like you hold it down.
Yo, what the hell?
It was ahead of its time, man.
Instead of 3 buttons, it's depending on how long you hold it. So medium punch, you hold it for like a medium amount of time.
Basically, but yeah, but like there was that one,
that?
and then there was the traditional 6-button one.
There's an alternate universe where Art played on the pressure-sensitive one, and he's not here today.
Yeah,
you know, it depends on that VHS store, right? Because they had the 6-button one. We have Art here today. But wow, that's wild. Starting with Street Fighter 1, I didn't know that. I figured it would have been Street Fighter 2. So Street Fighter 1, that's what you started with. And, you know, there's other fighting games. Well, actually, no, there's not really. It's Street Fighter 1. So what's the next game you get into? Is it Street Fighter 2 that hits the scene? It's weird. There were some fighting games around back then, but they tended to be hybrid because, you know, there was there was side scrollers / fighting games, right? So Street Fighter 1 was 1987, right? So there's like a 5-6 year gap like between Street Fighter 1 and 2, right? So then Street Fighter 2 came out. That just changed everything. You got to set the scene. So, where are you when you first see Street Fighter 2? Like, you've been hanging around in the arcades. You're in New York. Like, so where are you the day you see Street Fighter 2? What is the scene like?
I'm in the same video and rental and bodega shops, right? But instead of there being one cabinet, it's times 10, and it's everywhere. See, like, people don't. Like, if you weren't around during the Street Fighter 2 era, like, the cultural impact of it, although, you know, like, the games these days, they sell, like, a lot more. The cultural impact of the game at the time could not be understated. Literally, everywhere you went, Street Fighter.
Not just FGC people, like, just...
Not just FGC.
Just in general.
Not just FGC. Just straight up, just gamers.
we still feel the vibrations of that today, man. You see all the merch and everything. I know we talked about that a bit, but even then, like going back, like if you listen to music, like you know how many just random from late 90s,
bro, even battle rap,
you hear
even
for Street
battle
Fighter
rap to
2?
this day, everybody when someone makes a bar up, they always reference a Street Fighter 2 character.
But it was contemporary at the time, right? You go back, listen to the library music from that time, you hear it all the time, and it's part of the culture that's been cemented. So like, yeah, it can't be understated. It was everywhere. Like I'm from South Florida, we didn't really have arcades like that, bodegas, but you go to any random sports bar, I would still see Street Fighter 2 there. That's what I first mashed buttons on, was like, what's this game? It was everywhere you went, and so you couldn't avoid it. No matter where you were in USA, Street Fighter 2 was there.
Did you play a tournament into? Did you play any tournaments in Street Fighter 2?
So here's the interesting thing. So although I was too young to go to tournaments at the time, because Street Fighter 2 was out, I was like 11, right? But number one, I still had access to the internet. So there were these things that were precursors to forums, and there were these things that were precursors to Discord, right? It was called Usenet, right? And actually, the founders of the Evo Championship Series actually used like these discussion boards with other college nerds to discuss Street Fighter, right? We used to send tournaments to each other over VHS. We would copy a VHS and mail it to the homie for like $20-$30. That's how good people have it.
But by copy the VHS, like you mean someone filmed the arcade cab, right?
Yes,
like someone sitting there with a camera.
Yes.
Direct to VHS.
Mm-hmm. So like that's how I found out about the tournaments, right? And also the gaming magazines at the time, Electronic Gaming Monthly and GamePro, they did have tournament coverage. They did cover like the players in tournaments. That's how I learned like about Mike Watson, Tomo Ohira, Jeff Schaefer, Alex Valle, all of those guys. Those guys were all like in the magazines because they're a generation before me. Like I'm kind of like at the tail end of like old school.
Who are you using it to?
So when I first played 2, like I couldn't do a fireball on both sides, so I picked up Galef because like the sonic booms were just, it was just holding back and forth, and I'm like, damn, I can't do a fireball.
It didn't have anything to do with the playstyle though, since you're a Dawson player now. It wasn't like
it had nothing to do with the playstyle. It had nothing to do with the playstyle. It was just the fact that like I was starting like everybody else. Like I didn't know how to do inputs.
And you had limited time to practice, right? Because at the time, right, there's no training mode. You don't have a copy of the game at home. You got to pay money each time to play against another human, or maybe I guess if you find a net hour of the night, which I feel like in the beginning you couldn't find that.
Yeah, at the beginning you couldn't find it. At the beginning you couldn't find it, and like the move sets, it's like we go to the library. We would print out move sets from the internet in text form, like at the library.
That's
right?
Fire, bro. That's so fire.
Pulling together all your resources you possibly can. And it's still wild to me that you say you're on the internet back then. This is 92?
Yeah, this is 92. Yeah, so this is this is precursor World Wide Web. The web did not exist.
Right. Okay, so with us talking about Street Fighter 2, it also makes me think about like, I feel like everyone talks about Street Fighter 4. As far as the third strike time when it comes to the FGC, people only say like, oh, stuff almost died, and then Street Fighter 4 came out and saved everything. What was that time like where stuff almost died? Like, were you invested enough in fighting games?
Yeah.
At that point
so like that was the time. That was one of the times where I was invested in the FGC the most, right? Because when people mention the dark days, it's not that like fighting game scene died or anything. Like there was still alive and kicking. It just died like out of the out of like the general culture, right? We talked about how Street Fighter 2 had a huge cultural impact, and people that weren't even playing fighting games are playing Street Fighter 2. With Street Fighter 3, it had none of that. It was just the diehard. It was just completely the diehard. Right. So it's not that it died. It just died in popular culture, right? So it's still going on. All these years, like obviously like the Daigo moment, the Daigo Justin moment happened. That was amazing, and that happened during the Dark Era. The only thing that basically changed was we weren't getting an influx of new players into the scene, right? And the players that were vested in it, they were vested in it for over 5-10 years. We didn't get any relative new games from any of the big party publishers, especially not Capcom, until Street Fighter 4 came out. So that's what they mean by the Dark Ages.
So it was stagnant. It wasn't that it wasn't there. It was the things were stagnant, which, obviously that's something we discuss a lot. Like you always look towards the influx of new players, and that's the thing we highlight often. Anytime a new player is doing work in the tournament scene, I feel like it's super important to highlight because you always want new blood in the scene that shows growth for the scene. We haven't talked about Team Spooky yet, and you're part of that, and how that was formed prior to Street Fighter 4, right?
Yes.
So you guys,
yes.
let us know, like, when was that starting to form, and how the stage was set for you guys to capitalize on streaming once Street Fighter 4 became a thing.
So this is such a good question. So this all formulated. This all came together during the dark days, right? So this is during Street Fighter 3 Third Strike era, before Street Fighter 4 was even out, right? Me and Vic are homies through a mutual friend, right? We had started collabing together as like a team, and we had started learning like how to record footage and capture footage from events like during that Dark Ages period. I want to say 2006 to 2007, right? Yeah, so like it all culminated into me ending up going to Japan, seeing how the Japanese scene is before Street Fighter 4 comes out, and like and then ever since then, like that gave us the early knowledge that we needed to actually learn how to stream tournaments and stuff. This is all before Street Fighter 4.
Okay. So at that time when you went to Japan, you said that was 2007.
So I went there 2006, 2007. So I went there multiple times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. When was the first like rumors, like something that the air had changed, like the temperature was rising a little bit? You know, there were some tingles, some hairs on the back of your neck raising. When did you first catch the rumors that Capcom was coming back with something big? Like, when did that start? 2008, it hit arcades in Japan.
Yeah,
but
so
I actually don't know when the rumors began.
You know,
there had
like,
to be rumors first.
It was like, you know, like I want to say like it was like around like the beta time when Street Fighter 4 just came out. I think like around like E3 time, like in 2008, like around that year. Because I remember they started talking about it at E3. There was some early builds shown around by like Seth Killian, I believe. And I remember that year it was at EVO, but they had only the arcade version. So they had the red Felix cabinet, right? They brought the red Felix cabinet to EVO, right? And we all got to play it that year. At first, like the reaction was like a little mixed. Like, you know, like whenever there's like a new game that comes out, especially one that's been around for like, there's been a new game in like 10 years, you know, there's going to be mixed reactions in the scene. But obviously, once it came out, the general vibe, like just not even in the FGC, outside the FGC, was just absurd. I remember as soon as it came out in arcades, I went to EVO that year, and I went to Japan that year because I documented a lot of year one of Japanese Street Fighter 4. I remember being in Japan. There were like 10 you go to any arcade, it'd be like 10 cabinets. You have to wait like on a line just to actually play. Back at home in Chinatown Fair, I remember reading stories because we were all trading information through the internet and YouTube back then. It's 2009, right? So they're telling me stories like about how Henry got like one cabinet. The waiting list was like 100 people just to play Street Fighter 4 in one cabinet. Like, I was like, wow, this is 1991 all over again. This is crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so Street Fighter 4, everything is booming. We're back from the dark ages.
Booming in a crazy way. Remember, this when streaming first started. There was no streams.
So okay, so that's your first experience.
It all kind of peaked.
Yeah,
it kind of peaked too, because like he mentioned, like, you know, Team Spooky was coming together. You guys learned the technology. It sounds like right before. I wasn't sure when you guys kind of started getting into streaming. It sounds like right before Street Fighter 4. And this is before Twitch was a thing. You know, YouTube was still in its infancy. Online streaming didn't even exist. So you guys like, it all kind of lined up. But what it was interesting you just mentioned was that the scene didn't know how big it was going to be.
No,
it sounds like you guys. Sounds like the hardcore people were like, we're gonna wait and see. Capcom's coming back. All right. I mean, you've been gone a long time, Capcom. you know, like they didn't sound too confident or like just hype. But then when you saw the reaction, what was next? Like, you saw the reaction, you saw that people outside the FGC are getting in.
So obviously the hardcore tournament scene is a microcosm of what's happening, like, for the game, like as a whole with casual players, right? Mm-hmm. So what I started seeing like immediately, right, was tournament registration going up, way up, right? Like, I'll start playing in like 4 to 5 tournaments a week in the New York area, no problem, right? Like, it was a tournament like every day, everywhere you went. You started seeing like, you know, obviously there was a GameStop national tournament, right? Where like they flew out EO, Justin Wong, right? Like, and like it just flew in like a ton of talent, right? You started seeing like the first sponsorships in the FGC, right? You started seeing more international competition on a regular basis, because at that time, one of the things that was holding the FGC back was we didn't get to see international talent play all the time because nobody was sponsored back then, right? So
yeah, that was an interesting time. That the GameStop event really kind of set the pace for Street Fighter 4 as being more like esports, right?
Yeah, like yeah, it's so crazy to think about. I was like, wow.
Bro, so for you even using that word, Brian, I'm glad you even said that, like esports. What I do want to ask about is like in 4, that was the last time before I feel like, things were as big. You didn't have Street Fighter League, the cameras and stuff wasn't as nice, right? Things are a bit different back then. Do you prefer the FGC as it is now with more opportunities, or do you prefer how it was before when it was more dark and more niche?
It's such a hard question. It's like, because I feel like there's great stuff to both sides. You never want to go too far in one direction though. You want to borrow the best parts of both, I think, right? So obviously with esports, you want that financial support, you want the big lights, like you want like the international competition, you want the player talent, you want the endemic and non-endemic brands like involved, right? All that is great. Like it helps give the game a level of legitimacy that was not seen before. At the same time, so from the grassroots side, obviously, you want that realness, and you want like that vibe, and you want that authenticity, right? That so that's what I'm saying. Like, if you can combine the best from both worlds, I think you really have a complete package here. And
do you think it's balanced right now?
Fighter 5 has done that.
You think the scene is balanced right now in that regard?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like it took a while to get there. I think now, like I will say this much: I think Street Fighter Season 6, this is the best the game has ever been. This is the best the game has ever been. Like, as a competitor, like as a player, somebody that just wants to play casually, like, it has it all. So I couldn't be more excited to see what happens with Street Fighter 6.
Well, right now, even with you bringing up being a competitor, one of the most fascinating things, bro, that I want to ask you about is just the fact that you're later, like, you've been in the scene for a while. Like you said, you started in Street Fighter 1, but yet I feel like this last 2 years or so, you've improved so much more, man. Maybe last 2-3 years, like, you've improved so much more, even though you've been nice. A lot of times people would assume that only like a younger player, like in their early 20s or mid 20s, something like that, would be doing this. How have you been able to improve so much at this point in your career?
I think in fighting games, you're only as good as your competition, right? I've always been blessed to live like in an area like the Northeast. This is before online became really popular. I've always been blessed to live like in an area like from the Northeast where literal legends were made. Like, you got guys like Justin Wong, Eddie Lee, Chris G. The list goes on and on forever, right? Like, I'm always used to being able to play around world-class talent. So just by default, even if I'm not trying to be the best, I'm going to be playing the best, or some of the best players in the world in a close proximity. Number 2, I think the reason is fighting games. So fighting games are in a unique place where reactions are important, but it's not 100% everything. Positioning, space control, reading the opponent's mind. Those are all things that are important, and they're not necessarily based on reactions, right? So I basically try to play to my strengths, and knowing my weaknesses are I'm 40, right? So obviously my reaction is going to be slower than like a 20-year-old, right? The one thing that they don't have is experience, meaning like they try to rush in, not thinking about what could go wrong. So I try to use that to my advantage. I hope that gave you a little bit of insight.
It's experience, like you mentioned, like you've been actively practicing, and a lot of reactions in fighting games, it's about having experience to know what to look for.
Yeah.
So I feel like with most people, as they age, it's more like they lose the competitive drive, and they don't practice the situational awareness as much, right? So to me, what's impressive is not you being good at 40, it's you having the competitive drive to continue to put in the work to be good.
That much.
Because I see what's happening in the scene. 18-year-old Arturo will be jealous of what he's seeing today. He sees what's going on today, right? And he's like, damn, I'm like, where was all this stuff like when I was 18 and stuff?
Art, bro, I appreciate you coming on. Honestly, I want to make sure that I say thank you, man. Like, I know we talk even behind the scenes too, and I'm sure Brian shares the same sentiment, but stuff like even, whether it be no neutral, stuff like, Street Fighter 6 in general, or even more directly, what you just did for like Defend the North. There's so many different things, the countless NLBCs that we've played in at this point. There's a lot of things in this scene that wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for your contribution. So I just want to make sure that I give you your flowers and that you do know that, bro, you have directly or indirectly changed me and a whole lot of other players' lives, and I appreciate you for it, brother.
Thank you so much, guys. And at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure we all love Street Fighter and fighting games in general here. I'm really confident about the future of Street Fighter and fighting games in general, just knowing that you guys are at the head of the Capcom USA side of things. So big ups to you guys. Keep doing your thing, both of y'all.
Always a pleasure talking to one of the GOATs in the scene, and Arturo, my man, nycfurby.